What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I am your host, and my name is John, and we are back with our third episode this week for the third UFC event in 1 week's time with the UFC Fight Night headlined by Alistair Overeem versus Walt Harris. We got 11 fights going down from Jacksonville, Florida again. The last event was a great card, had a lot of fun fights on it, and we did very well betting on it. Gave a lot of good tips on the last card, and look to continue that streak on this one. Have had 3 very profitable cards in a row with the bets and picks and everything like that, so look to keep it going with this card. And this card has very close odds on all the fights besides the new Giga Chikadze fight. Pretty much all of the odds on this are under 2-1, and that means we're going to have a lot of close fights, and a lot of these dogs should hit. I'm thinking about passing on a lot of these fights, but I do like a few betting spots that I will advise throughout the rest of the podcast. So let's get things started in the heavyweight division. We have Don'Tale Mayes taking on Mayes-Nascimento. The opening betting lines for this one was Mayes, the -150 favorite, to Nascimento as the +130 underdog. Right now, we are looking at a pick'em fight at -105, a total coin flip fight, and I think that that's pretty accurate, although I do slightly lean Nascimento in this one. Mayes does have UFC experience, but I just have really not liked what I've seen from him. He spends a lot of time on his back. He gets taken down pretty frequently, and he's fighting a jiu-jitsu based fighter who has most of his wins by submission. But the problem is we just have not seen enough from Nascimento. He's only got 5 minutes of footage. He's got really raw striking, and we haven't actually seen him land a legit takedown. He has 2 fights that he's won from top position, one with ground and pound and one with an arm triangle choke on the Contender Series, but both of those fights were like weird exchanges, and the guy fell over, or they got slipped or something like that. He hasn't actually landed a real takedown yet, so we have no idea what his wrestling ability is like, and we have not seen him fight anybody good. The one guy he finished was a total bum who fell over and just got finished right away on the regional scene, and even on the Contender Series, the guy had nothing off his back. The guy's name was Martinek. He had nothing off his back, had no idea how to get up, and just basically got smashed with some ground and pound, got passed, got mounted, and eventually got submitted with an arm triangle choke. So I guess Nascimento showed a little bit in that fight, but Mayes has just really shown nothing besides surviving versus Cyril Gain. He was dropped and hurt a lot in that fight and just kept toughing it out, and eventually did get finished by a heel hook of all things in like the last 15 seconds of the fight. But when it comes down to it, I just think that Mayes has spent so much time on his back and has very bad ability to get off of his back. I just don't think you could be betting him at this price. I mean, he spent 10 minutes on his back versus Alan Crowder on the Contender Series a few years back. So there's just no way you can bet Mayes at -105, I believe. I just think there's no value on him. So this is going to be Nascimento or pass for me. I'll go ahead and pick Nascimento because he trains at American Top Team. There's some pictures of him training with some very good training partners out there, and that means a lot. If he's still getting in good rounds with good partners during this pandemic, that's a pretty good sign. And I think that he will win by, I guess we'll go with first round submission, but it should be a pretty sloppy, low level heavyweight fight, and I would not go too crazy. So it's Nascimento or pass in this one. The next fight is in the women's flyweight division. We have Courtney Casey taking on Mara Romero-Borella. The opening betting line for this one was Casey -155, Borella +135. Right now we are seeing Casey -150, Borella +140, so not much action coming in either side in this one. I think Courtney Casey's getting a little more of the action, and I agree with it. Thing to note about this one is Courtney Casey is moving up to 125 in this one. Borella is a natural flyweight and has fought there before, but Casey moving up here on this short notice opportunity. I really favor Casey just because she's the busier fighter. She has much more active striking numbers. I tweeted out something earlier this week that in the past 42 minutes of Borella's cage time, she only landed 74 strikes, which is like under 2 strikes per minute, and it's a really terrible number. While Casey has landed like 200 strikes in her past 45 minutes worth of cage time, and an average is close to 5 strikes per minute. So when this one's on the feet, which I think is where most of the fight will take place, I just favor Casey to be landing way more strikes. It's not like she's technical or anything. I don't think there's a technical advantage for either of these women on the feet. It's ugly stuff from both of them. So in situations like that, I just favor the busier and more aggressive fighter, which is Casey. And in the grappling in this one, Borella will be the one looking to land takedowns. She sometimes does that and has an okay top game like she showed versus Faria, but I think Casey can stuff takedowns and can get off her back. She's had some decent guard submissions that she's used to get back to her feet and stuff like that. So I don't think that Casey's in too much danger here versus Borella. Although if Borella does win this fight, I do think it is by getting takedowns and maybe using that slight size advantage to get her that top time and win these rounds. So the pick for me is going to be Casey by decision. I think that she has the much better volume throughout the 3 rounds and wins these rounds. But at this price, I guess there's some value. I do cap her closer to like 60-65%, but I think this is too low level, and the fact that Casey's moving up is worrying me a little bit. So I'm going to just pass on this one overall. I think it's a little too unpredictable to bet. So once again, pick is Casey decision, but pass in the betting line. The next fight is in the featherweight division. We have Nate Landwehr taking on Darren Elkins. The opening betting line was Landwehr minus 175 to Elkins plus 150. Since then, the line has flipped. We are now seeing Elkins favorite minus 120, Landwehr plus 110 underdog, and that's a crazy line movement. I mean, I didn't even know Landwehr opened as that much of a favorite. That's, I'd say, a bit wide, just because Landwehr is unproven in the UFC and had kind of a rough UFC debut. I mean, pretty much as rough as you get knocked out cold in the first round. But I don't think that he really looked that bad in that fight, honestly. He got taken down early, defended a deep Darce choke from Burns, got back to his feet and just started trading. It was looking good from then on because the biggest threat was Burns' grappling, had not shown anything really in the striking on tape, and then he just landed a crazy knee out of nowhere. So it wasn't that bad of a loss for Landwehr. Despite him getting knocked out, I still have some confidence in him in his UFC career, and I think this is a good matchup here versus Elkins. Mostly because Elkins is really on the decline and he's just been looking worse and worse fight to fight. I don't think that Elkins can hurt Landwehr on the feet much in this one, and I think that Elkins will really struggle to land takedowns and keep top game. I think that's the only way Elkins wins is by the grappling. I just do not see any way that he outstrikes Landwehr here. Landwehr is the more physical guy. He has, I think, the better boxing. I think he has more power, definitely more aggressive and higher volume. So Elkins' chin has been looking really deteriorated too. He was getting dropped by spinning back kicks from Hall last fight and was making Hall look like an incredible kickboxer out there, even though he's a total jiu-jitsu guy. And I mean, I think we just saw from that fight that Elkins has pretty much nothing left in the tank, and I'm pretty surprised at this line here that so many people are betting him, and I guess they're just, I don't know, fading Landwehr, but I still like what I've seen from Landwehr. I mean, I watched probably 2 hours of this guy fighting M1 Global against really good competition, and I know what the guy can do. I think he does fight better in those 5-round fights when he can drown his opponents late and use his cardio and volume, but I think he'll still get it done in the 3-round fight here. I think he outstrikes Elkins, avoids getting taken down, and either likely knocks out Elkins or maybe struggles finishing the notoriously tough Elkins and goes to the decision in this one. But either way, I would favor Landwehr's volume in all the rounds, and I actually do think he does finish Elkins. I think he just overwhelms him with pressure and volume and gets Elkins to shell up and get finished. So I'm betting Landwehr here. I think plus money on Landwehr is a great bet, and I think he gets the job done this weekend. The next fight is in the featherweight division. We have Giga Chikadze taking on Rivera, and this is the fight that just came together in the past 24 hours. Mike Davis pulled out of his fight against Giga Chikadze, and they brought in Rivera here to replace Mike Davis and to fight Giga Chikadze on about 1 day's notice. Rivera is a career-long bantamweight. He fought his entire career at bantamweight, and he did get some nice 4th-round finishes in his most recent 2 fights, showing a little championship experience there. But, I mean, I was unimpressed with him in all the tape that I've seen from him. He does have the ability to hit some takedowns. He's shown some wrestling ability, getting a crazy scissor sweep takedown and shooting some double legs. So he definitely has the ability to take the fight to the ground. I just haven't seen a reliable enough wrestling and top position from him to think that he can take down the bigger guy in Chikadze. Chikadze actually looked pretty good in his takedown defense against Jamal Emmers, who was a college wrestler. And Also versus Brandon Davis. I think he got taken down a few times in that fight, but was able to hit some opportunistic reversals and land the more damaging strikes on the feet in that one. So I think that's what happens here. I think that Chikadze outstrikes Rivera pretty easily on the feet in this one. Rivera does not, I mean, he looked pretty comfortable striking on the fights that I saw of him. He's a southpaw, but he just does not have a good enough technique or power. I just don't see anywhere where he's going to be a threat to the much more experienced kickboxer in Chikadze. So Chikadze is going to be hurting Rivera on the feet. I think that he's able to avoid any takedowns or getting stuck on his back, and he probably finishes Rivera here in the later rounds because Rivera's taking this on short notice. So I think Rivera hangs tough to like the second or third round, but then Chikadze gets a late knockout in this one. And the opening betting line I didn't even mention in this one because it's not on best fight odds right now. I believe Chikadze opened up at minus 265, and there was some two-way action coming in early, but the heavy action is coming on Chikadze right now. He's minus 345, and I think that the value has been gone. I think I was able actually to get in on Chikadze at an incredible price at minus 240 due to some weird line movement on 5-dimes earlier today, but that line looks to be gone at this point, and Chikadze has got bet down pretty heavily. So I would avoid it at this point. I'd say Chikadze wins pretty comfortably, but there's not much value on the line at where it sits now. The next fight is Kevin Holland versus Anthony Hernandez. The opening betting line for this one was Holland minus 150 to Hernandez plus 130, and right now we are seeing a pick'em minus 105 for both guys. So the more action coming in on Hernandez in this one, and I think I agree with that line movement. I think that this is going to be a really competitive fight. Should have some fun exchanges in it, especially on the ground. I think both of these guys prefer to grapple, although they're definitely not shy of striking on the feet. I think Holland is the better striker in this one by a pretty decent margin. Hernandez is pretty raw on the feet and kind of just charges forward without much defense and kind of just winging offense like he did on the Contender Series. But Hernandez really thrives on the mat, hitting takedowns, getting top position. But he had a really close fight with Brendan Allen, who was actually the most recent guy to defeat Holland in his last fight. And Hernandez outgrappled Brendan Allen. Had a lot of back and forth exchanges in that one, but definitely spent the majority of that fight on top, hitting takedowns and controlling Allen. Kevin Holland usually gets in really close decisions. His last two fights were fights that really could have gone either way. I think he should have lost the GM 3-1, and I do think he deserved the win against Alessio Di Chirico. And he's just a really worrisome fighter to bet on because sometimes he lacks initiative. He does not pressure his opponents. He does not really look like he wants to win that badly at some times in there. So frustrating fighter to bet on, and that's got to be a huge concern here. Even though I do think he should be the better striker, I do think he could get taken down. He could get stuck on bottom by Hernandez. After all, Holland was outgrappled by Allen in his last fight, and you hate to do MMA math, but Hernandez did outgrapple Allen as well. So I think that Hernandez does have the ability to hit takedowns here, get on top, and win rounds. But if this fight stays on the feet, if Holland is able to stuff takedowns, I favor him to outstrike Hernandez and to win the fight that way. But I mean, this fight is just going to be razor close, as I mentioned, with a lot of Holland fights. I think that at the coin flip odds here, I don't think there's much value on either guy. I think that maybe the guys who came in on Hernandez at plus money might have gotten some good value on that one, but I think this fight will end up being tied 1 round apiece going into the third. It will be a competitive third round, and maybe one guy falls down to his back and spends the last 30 seconds on his back and loses the last round. And it's going to be really down to the wire in this one. I think it does go to the scorecards in this one, and I think that Hernandez is going to be my pick just because he shows a little more initiative, a little more aggressiveness. He's going to be the one trying to hit takedowns and get on top, while Holland is going to be looking to keeping the fight on the floor or on the feet and trying to outstrike Hernandez there. But I just do not trust Holland's takedown defense enough to stay standing, so I'm going to side with Hernandez to win a decision here. The next fight is in the welterweight division. We have Matt Brown taking on Miguel Baeza. The opening betting line, we have Baeza minus 170 as the favorite to Brown, the plus 130 underdog. Right now we are seeing Baeza minus 147 to Brown plus 137. and that means the more action is coming in on the veteran Matt Brown, and I agree with the line movement here. Although I think two-way action is coming in on it now. I think people originally came in on Baeza. He was around 2-1 at one point, and now heavy action is coming on Matt Brown in the past few days. So I think people are starting to realize this is going to be a really close fight. I'm not really impressed with what I've seen from Baeza at all in his Contender Series fight with Reina and in his UFC debut against Aldana. Neither of those guys were that good, and Baeza did handle them accordingly. But I mean, he struggled with Reina a little bit. He got rocked with some punches by Reina and struggled in the boxing defense aspect of that fight. He really dominated Hector Aldana and had good leg kicks in that fight and looked good in that one. But Aldana is really bad, and I think that the Baeza has still have a lot to prove before we trust him as a -150 favorite over Matt Brown. Even at -150, I wouldn't be betting Baeza. I think this is a total dog or pass situation because, I mean, I thought Brown looked pretty decent against Ben Saunders in his comeback fight. He got in guard and was in a pretty tight triangle, but had great sub defense and was able to get the fight standing again and was able to do damage on Saunders standing, caught some nice kicks and did damage on top position from his own, and eventually got a ground and pound finish in round 2 of that fight. So was pretty impressed with Brown coming off that long layoff, and I think that he has the tools to make this a tough, gritty fight for Baeza. Baeza is only like 8-0, I think, so he's going to be at a huge experience disadvantage versus Brown here. And I think that Baeza is not really too dangerous in any area. I think that he does have good leg kicks and decent boxing, but I don't think that'll be much for Brown to overcome. He's seen guys tougher than Baeza before, and Baeza's wrestling is nothing to marvel over. I have not seen anything impressive in terms of his takedowns or his top game to think that he's going to be able to get Brown on the ground. So maybe best case scenario in this one for Baeza is a low output kickboxing decision, but I think Brown's going to be the aggressor here. I think Brown's going to be landing more strikes in these rounds, and I'm actually going to pick Matt Brown to win this one. I like his value as an underdog, and I think that Brown wins a decision here. So maybe we see some more depth to Baeza's game and he shows some impressive skills here. Maybe he attacks the body of Matt Brown that has been notoriously weak throughout his career, and it is possible that Matt Brown's durability is questionable, and we just didn't really see it because he was fighting another declining fighter in Ben Saunders, and we could see a big athletic difference between Baeza and Brown here, and that could lead to Baeza winning this one. But I'm going to stick with the veteran Matt Brown and thinks he gets it done by decision. The next fight is in the featherweight division. We have Song Yadong taking on Marlon Vera. The opening betting line for this one was Yadong -175 to Vera +150. Right now we are seeing Yadong -185 to Vera +170. So more action coming in on the favorite Song Yadong's way in this one. And right off the bat, there is some doubt this fight will happen. Apparently there's like a visa issue, whatever that could possibly mean for Song Yadong. I mean, he's in America, he's weighed in already, and there's some controversy over a visa issue or something. I don't really know what's going on, but it's possible that Uriah Faber replaces him and fights Chito Vera, but I don't think that happens. I mean, if Song Yadong is not able to fight, I don't think that Uriah Faber is stepping in here. That's such a ridiculous idea, and I can't believe the UFC even entertained it, but that's beside the fact. We'll just break down the matchup as if it's happening anyway, because I do think it'll happen at this point. We haven't heard any cancellation, and the fights start in like 18 hours. So let's keep our fingers crossed that the fight happens, and we don't analyze it for nothing. So right off the bat, this fight is at 45 when both of these guys are natural 35ers. So we should see them both better hydrated, and I think that could be a big thing for Yadong, who actually gassed out in his last fight versus Cody Stamann. He struggled with the grappling of Stamann early, got a point deducted, and still ended up with a draw and not a loss on his record. So that was a pretty fortunate fight for Yadong. But in Yadong's UFC career before that fight, I mean, he was looking really good. His stand-up was looking very impressive. He had a nice knockout over Perez. He outstruck Vince Morales in the first few rounds of that fight. I think he knocked out Arantes and actually outgrappled Arantes in that fight too. So Yadong is very well rounded, and despite getting taken down and outgrappled by the lifelong wrestler Cody Stamann, his takedown defense in that fight was actually pretty good. He showed very good fundamentals, and he's doing the right thing in a lot of situations. He just got chain wrestled by a great wrestler in Cody Stamann, and Marlon Vera is not that type of wrestler. He maybe can hit an opportunistic takedown or clinch takedown or trip or something like that, but he is not nearly the wrestler of Stamann. So Vera does not have the ability to hit takedowns on Yadong like Stamann did. So Yadong has a lot less to worry about in this fight. And when it's on the feet in this one, I think Yadong should be counter-punching Vera and landing some hard strikes, because I just don't like Vera's boxing defense. He has gotten tagged with some punches by some questionable fighters. He's lost some rounds to some questionable fighters pretty recently. And I just think that on the feet, we're going to see a pretty wide striking discrepancy for Song Yadong. And to prevent that, Vera's going to have to use a lot of kicks. He's going to have to kick the legs of Yadong, limit the movement, and look to light up the body and head with kicks as well. Because I think Vera might be like a longer fighter. He seems like he has pretty long legs, and the kicks are going to be a huge factor if Vera wants to win the striking in this one. But I think I trust the takedown defense of Song Yadong. I think he avoids getting stuck on his back. And one thing I will say about Yadong's get-ups versus that Cody Stamann fight, Yadong was well aware that Stamann is a wrestler and not a very heavy submission guy, and was getting up a little recklessly in that one, giving up his back. And I think that if Vera were to put him in similar spots, Yadong would be in a lot more trouble versus Vera, because Vera is much more willing to dive on submissions to get your back, to go for an armbar or something like that. So I think if Yadong gets in some close grappling exchanges, he should be careful, and he could possibly get caught by a submission versus Vera here. But I'm going to favor the takedown defense of Yadong, keep the fight standing, avoid getting stuck on his back or submitted by Vera. And I do think that Yadong wins the striking this one by just having a big boxing advantage, and Vera's defense on the feet is a little worrisome, and I do not think he has the striking tools to outstrike Yadong. So I think it'll be a close fight. I think Vera might even win a round, but I'm going to go with Yadong decision as my pick. The next fight takes place in the middleweight division. We have Anders-Jotko taking on Eryk Anders. This fight opened a pick'em at -110. Since then, Jotko has been bet down to -142 to Anders +132. So more action coming in Jotko's way. I'm just going to say it right off the bat. I think that this line should be flipped. I think that Anders should be the favorite and Jotko should be the dog. And mostly because of just how bad Jotko has looked lately. And don't mistake that win over Alan Amedovski. That guy is a total white belt off of his back, and Jotko dominated him on the ground in that one like he should have. And if you really look at the Marc-Andre Barriault fight, the most recent one of Jotko's fight, you really see what I'm talking about. I mean, Jotko looked terrible in that one, despite getting the win. I mean, Joe Rogan at one point even said, he's like, man, Jotko keeps his head straight up, doesn't he? And I think that a counter puncher could easily take advantage of that. Now, Anders is not a very potent striker. I'm not impressed with his striking technique or his power, and his output is really his biggest problem. He is extremely low output and tends to get in some low output decisions that are questionable. I mean, he got lucky winning his last one against Gerald Meerschaert, in my opinion. But I think that Anders can take advantage of that bad boxing defense versus Jotko, because Jotko just looks so hittable, and he looks sloppy in the clinch and his striking exchanges. I mean, he's always had problems with composure and gassing out, where he gassed out versus Hall and Tavares and lost those fights by knockout in the third round, I believe. So despite me not being impressed with Anders, really, I think that he's the much better fighter than Jotko at this point in their careers. And Anders should be more physical, definitely the stronger and more powerful fighter in there. Jotko is going to be looking to cage push. I mean, that's really his bread and butter, is cage pushing. He shoots a weak takedown, it doesn't work, and he just pushes you against the cage for like 2 or 3 minutes. I mean, that was pretty much where the entire Marc-Andre Barriault fight took place, and that was voted, I think, one of the worst fights of 2019. So I just think that Jotko has been looking worse and worse lately, and I do not think he has any success with wrestling here. I think he gets outstruck in the feet, and I think that his boxing defense is a huge liability for him getting knocked out. But I'm going to pick Anders by decision. I just have not seen enough reliable knockout power or aggression from him to think he will actually get the knockout. I just think he slightly outstrikes Jotko in the numbers and wins a boring, close decision in this one. The next fight is in the featherweight division. We have Edson Barboza taking on Dan Ige. The opening betting line for this one was Barboza the favorite at -140 to Ige the +120 dog. Right now we are seeing Edson -135 to Ige +125. So two-way action coming in on this fight, and this is my favorite fight on the card by far. I think it's the most technical and skilled fight on the card by far too. So really looking forward to this one. And right off the bat, you got to mention that Barboza is dropping down to 145, and I really question this move. He's a historic 155er, and in the middle of this pandemic, he decides to drop down to 45. He made the weight. He looked pretty good on the scales, if I have to say so. But that's not really a good indicator of how the fight's going to go. I don't like to take too much stock in that. But I just think that this is a really bad matchup for Barboza despite the weight. And I think the weight is going to make it even more difficult for him to win. I mean, Edson is a very athletically reliant fighter. He uses a lot of movement and footwork and explosive striking and kind of relies on getting hit and being durable. And he looked pretty durable in that last fight versus Felder. But I just think that this move to 145 is going to put all that into question, and you're not going to be able to trust that durability of Barboza that you've been used to at 155. That only really potent knockout artists like Gaethje have been able to knock him out. So it's needless to say, but I do not like this move to 145 for Barboza at all. And not to mention that, but they're giving him Dan Ige, who's on a 5-fight win streak at featherweight over some really good competition. And I've been really impressed with what I've seen from Ige. I think he's improving a lot fight to fight. I think he definitely still has his flaws. I mean, he's kind of accepting the fact that he always loses the second round. I think he acknowledged it in his last post-fight interview, but he's like, oh, it's okay. I'm going to lose the second round because I'll win the first and third. And he comes out strong. He usually starts to tire a little bit, and then he comes back strong in the third. And he's done that a few times. I think he did it versus Aguilar too, and dropped Aguilar in the first, lost the second, and came back and just was the more physical, aggressive fighter and won the third round. Same thing happened with Bektic. He got taken down in round 2 of that fight and stuck on bottom and really got out-grappled by Bektic in round 2. But you're not going to have to worry about that with Barboza here because Barboza never offensive wrestles. So that's not really a concern here. So Ige is going to be looking to pressure. He's going to be looking to cut off the cage versus Barboza, maybe chop down his legs and look to outbox him. And I think that he does so with success because Barboza just has terrible footwork, terrible tendencies, and as the guys on Heavy Hands call it, the Barboza gallop. He just constantly does this gallop where he struts backwards in this like terrible motion and just doesn't really know what he's doing. He's kind of just moving backwards in a circular motion and trying not to get finished. So he does that when he runs out of ideas and when he's striking. So if Ige is pressuring him and Barboza starts galloping backwards, that means he's lost. And that means Ige probably has won the fight. And I think Ige is going to mix in takedowns. He's going to pressure Barboza hard. And it's possible that Barboza looks better at 145. I think the chances are very slim. But it's possible that his power carries down and he's able to kick Ige and keep him on the outside and win this fight by decision, possibly even knockout of his own. I just don't think that he has looked very good lately, and I don't think it's likely that he looks good at 145 against a hard matchup like Ige. So I think that this is a perfect matchup for Ige. I mean, Barboza folds to pressure fighters, and he really struggles with wrestlers and good boxers, and Ige is all of that. And you add in the cardio of Ige that is relentless, and it is always there and coming at you hard in round 3. I just don't see Barboza winning this fight. I actually don't see how Barboza is the favorite in this fight. I cap Ige as the favorite at around -150, and I think he gets probably his best win to date here over Barboza. I think the betting line in this one is heavily influenced by name value for Barboza and people not realizing how good Dan Ige is. I encourage you to watch the Kevin Kevin Aguilar fight and the Bektik fight, and see just how relentless Ige is in rounds 1 and 3 of those fights, despite him losing round 2. But I think we see Ige put on a great performance here, and he gets the he could knock out Barboza, honestly, from just constant pressure, but I think that the decision is more likely here. So I'll pick Ige by decision here. The next fight is the co-main event. In the women's strawweight division, we have Claudia Gadelha taking on Angela Hill. The opening betting line for this one was Gadelha -210 to Hill +180. Right now, we are seeing Gadelha -215 to Hill +195. So the line is staying just about the same, although there is two-way action coming in on this fight. And big fan of Angela Hill, but I just think this is a very bad matchup for her because I still think Claudia Gadelha has some takedowns in her in the early rounds. I think that Gadelha has a massive strength and physicality advantage over Hill, and I just don't see a way that Hill stops the takedown in round 1, to be honest. I think that Gadelha is well aware that Hill is the better striker. Gadelha's striking has never really been good, but it's looked especially bad lately. She got outstruck by Esparza and by Ansarov, although she did pick up a nice decision win over Marcos in her last fight. She really paced herself well in that fight. She usually expends a ton of energy in round 1 and 2 and then gasses out in round 3, and lost a few decisions because of that, and actually made a pretty good adaptation. So I'll give it to Gadelha. She did control her gas tank very well versus Marcos, but extremely low output decision. She didn't attempt any takedowns in that fight, and I think that is impossible versus Angela Hill, because if the fight stays standing, Gadelha will get pieced up and will get easily outstruck on the numbers by Hill and lose the decision. So I think that Gadelha is going to be looking for the takedown. I think she'll be looking for it early. The game plan is definitely going to be hitting takedowns like Randa Marcos did. I mean, Marcos hit a clinch takedown on Angela Hill and kept her on bottom and side control, had heavy top pressure, and then eventually was able to take her back, transition to an armbar, and finished Angela Hill by submission in round 1. And I think that Gadelha is a much better grappler than Randa Marcos, so that performance was extremely worrisome. And no doubt that Hill has improved a lot since then. She's picked up a ton of victories, has been super active, but she has not fought any good grapplers, and I think that she still will have a lot of the same problems that she faced versus Marcos, sadly. So Angela Hill is my girl. She's made me a lot of money already. I mean, already in 2020, 2 fights in 2020, and we picked her on both of them, and we bet her on both of those fights. But sadly, I'm going to be picking against her here. I think that Gadelha does get it done in round 1 by submission, but look to live bet this one. I think this is a pass in terms of a pre-fight bet. I wouldn't lay the chalk on Gadelha, and I don't think there's much value on Hill because I think that Gadelha will get Hill down in the early rounds, and it's going to come from the clinch is my prediction. Angela Hill loves to go to the clinch. She has got great Muay Thai skills and uses good elbows and knees in the clinch, and that's her go-to defense when someone's kind of rushing at her. So Gadelha is going to rush at her. Angela will clinch her up, and then Gadelha is just going to body lock her and just rip her to the ground using her pure strength like she always does. Gadelha doesn't have really high technical takedowns. She just uses her massive strength advantage to just muscle girls to the ground, and that's why she gasses out a lot. And that's really what she did versus Nina Ansaroff. She just muscled her to the ground once or twice in rounds 1 and 2 and still lost that decision though. So that could happen here. Look out for a live bet opportunity on Angela Hill, because if Gadelha is not hitting takedowns, live bet Hill. If Hill gets taken down and gets up, live bet Hill. If Gadelha gets takedowns and can't do much with it and gets out of round 1, then you live bet Hill. I mean, this is going to be a great live bet spot if Angela Hill does not get finished or gets severely out-grappled in the first few minutes. So I would advise passing on Angela Hill pre-fight, because I think we get a better price on her in the live betting window. If you don't have the opportunity to live bet or bet in the middle of rounds like I do, then lock in your pre-fight action. But I would not advise it, and I think that Gadelha round 1 is going to be the pick. I actually placed a bet 0.75 units on Gadelha by submission at plus 600, and it has since been bet down to plus 450, so we did get some good value on that. And the pick is going to be Gadelha by submission, although I would definitely be happy to see my girl Angela Hill pull off the upset, and we'll be looking to live bet her if the circumstances are right. So that is going to take us to the main event of the evening in the heavyweight division. We got Walt Harris taking on Alistair Overeem. The opening betting line for this one was Harris, the favorite, at -150 to Overeem +130. Right now, we are seeing Harris -135 to Overeem +125. So line margins have tightened up. There's two-way action coming in on this fight, and I understand why. It's a really hard fight to predict. I think you got the youth and the athleticism of Walt Harris versus the skill and the experience of Alistair Overeem. It's a tough fight because, of course, it's at heavyweight, and that just adds a whole nother list of variables and variability that could be thrown into the fight. You know, knockouts are much more common, cardio drop-offs are common, and, you know, who knows how much these guys are training for this fight. One thing I want to note is that Walt Harris weighed in about 15 pounds heavier than he usually does too, so not a good sign from Harris, although I'm sure he's been training for this fight for a long time. It's been scheduled for the past few months and has been constantly pushed back, and he's finally getting this fight, so I'm sure he'll be prepared. Although he has not fought in 5 rounds before, and it'll be interesting to see how he looks if the fight does go there. But I honestly do not think it goes that long. I think these two are destined to finish each other in the first 3 rounds, and would be really shocked to see it go to those 4th and 5th rounds. I mean, Alistair Overeem has been in several main events and just made it to the 4th and 5th round for the first time versus Rosenstrike. So I do not see him go into the 5th round here against a fellow newcomer in 5-round fights like Walt Harris. The reason why I think this fight is so hard to predict is because I can see either guy outstriking each other and either guy outgrappling each other. I think that Overeem is much more technical on the ground. I think that he could hit a clinch takedown, like a trip or something like he hit against Rosenstrike, and keep top position and maybe exploit that weakness off of Walt Harris's back. I can see Walt Harris just muscling a takedown or using his athleticism to blast a double leg and put Reem on his back and look to replicate some of the success that Curtis Blades had. And then on the feet in this one, I think that Harris could rush Overeem and just unleash a ton of offense and output at him and maybe touch his chin, maybe hurt him, or just maybe consistently outstrike him. And then I could see Alistair Overeem using his massive technique advantage to maybe use his footwork, clinch up Harris, outstrike him in the clinch, land knees like he did against Olenek. He's just going to have to look to constantly avoid that big barrage of offense from Walt Harris. And I see the reason why Harris is favored is because he needs less to go right for him to win. He only needs to land one shot, or he only needs to just rush Reem and back him up against the fence and unleash a barrage of punches. That's all he needs. While I think Alistair Overeem, he needs to hit a takedown. He needs to keep top position. He needs to tire Harris out, or he needs to clinch up on the feet and needs to outstrike him over multiple minutes and wear Harris down. You know, a lot more has to go right for Alistair Overeem in this fight. So in my opinion, it's going to be a pass for me. I don't see myself betting this fight. My pure pick is going to be Walt Harris by first-round knockout. I just see him rushing at Alistair Overeem. Alistair is going to shell up against the fence like he did against Olenek pretty recently, and I think that the barrage of offense from Harris is just going to melt Alistair Overeem. Maybe 1 or 2 punches connects on Overeem and he just drops to the ground. I think it's going to be kind of an uneventful stoppage, but I think that Alistair Overeem does fall by the hands of Walt Harris here by knockout in the first round. So not a confident pick at all in this one. I'm kind of going back and forth on who I think is going to win this one, and I realistically could see it going either way. And in terms of the betting window, I think I'm going to say it's dog or pass. I think that Walt Harris by round 1 knockout, round 2 knockout might be a good prop to play if you want to bet on Walt Harris, but I think that there's not much value in either side in this one. I'm going to be passing on betting on both of these guys. Although I do understand if you want to play this fight, you might see it more linear than I do, but I think this fight is very complicated and could go a lot of different ways. So I'm not going to be betting this one, and definitely would advise not betting too heavy if you choose to do so. So the bets I have locked in so far are Nate Landwehr at +110, Dan Ige at +115. I will be adding more to Dan Ige. Look to go in at Eric Anders at +130. Look to go in on Brown at +140, and we'll probably end up on Nascimento as well in the first fight of the evening in that fun low-level heavyweight fight. And then look to live bet Angela Hill. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this will be a fun card. I think it'll have some good live betting opportunities, but don't be afraid to pass on some of these fights. I think they're very close fights and pretty hard to predict. So that's going to be all for this episode of Martian MMA. It's the third episode in the span of 1 week. I think we have a week or two off of UFC now before the next one, so it'll give everyone some time to recuperate from this crazy week of UFC that we've had for the past week with these 3 cards. So thank you all for listening. Thank you all for sticking with me throughout these 3 cards. I know it's been a lot of podcasts, but it's been some hard work making them, but I'm glad I grinded out all the episodes, and hope you all enjoy the card this Saturday night. Peace.